What's up, y'all? It is your girl, Jackie O, the OG original Black digital nomad and globetrotting mama. I have been crisscrossing this beautiful globe for the last 25 years. Yes, y'all, 25 years. You don't get to call yourself an OG just because you done taken one trip somewhere. And currently, I slow travel full time with my toddler daughter, Ruth. We were spending 2019, 2020 crisscrossing through Central and South America, although COVID-19 has us sheltering in place. But we are getting ready to head to Mexico soon to spend the rest of 2020 in Mexico. And I make videos devoted to informing, educating, inspiring, and motivating other Black women to either move abroad and or travel full time. Now, today's show is a little different because I am calling this show Like a Native, and I am kind of flipping this whole move abroad dynamic on its head, and I'm actually interviewing people who are from that country or who are from a country to talk about their perceptions of expats, experiences in their country, what their countries are about. So this is my very first episode doing it. So make sure you guys leave some feedback below. And if this is your first time to my channel, please like and subscribe. Why don't you do that? Just click them buttons down there, like, subscribe, and make sure you get that notification button. So we're going to jump on to it. Let's see how it goes. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's have some amazing conversations because I feel so blessed to have met such a variety of just international, cosmopolitan, critical thinkers all over the world. And I said, let me just bring some of these sisters and maybe some brothers too, and let's just have some conversations about places that people are going to, what it's like in their country, the political climate, and then just some everyday practical realities. Like, we're just gonna talk about it all. And as a Nigerian, as an African American, like, I got lots of questions about South Africa, a country that I have visited many times and a country that still continues to be an enigma for me. So that's who we're gonna start with. Let's get into it, y'all. What's up, y'all, and welcome back. This is your girl, Jackie O. And as I said, as an African, as a Nigerian, as a Yoruba woman, I am super, super duper pumped. And I get pumped about a lot of things, but life is all about doing things that bring you joy. But I'm super pumped about this show because I am glad, particularly as an African who was raised in America, to see the shift amongst Black Americans and their perception of the continent of Africa is just amazing. Because, I grew up in the era of people thought We Are the World represented Africa and Michael Jackson singing to famine-stricken babies. And I also grew up protesting. I remember my mama would get me in a car and we would go to Washington, D.C. and we would protest. I can't remember if it was the South African Embassy or the Special Interest Section. I believe that South Africa at some point lost diplomatic relations with the United States. So in some ways, South Africa never really had a good taste in my mouth. But I will say I also watched Nelson Mandela be released from prison, and I watched the lines of South Africans vote for him become the first Black president. So there's so much that there's so much wrapped up just in my short life, because it's short, y'all. I mean, I may be older, but I ain't that old, okay? About this country like South Africa. And then, of course, as a Nigerian, y'all know Nigerians went hard against like apartheid, and there are some issues going on right now between like Nigerians and South Africans. So we're going to talk about all that because I think it's important that we have those conversations. And I also think it's important for women who are interested in moving abroad that you just ain't deucing going to a country, going to that continent of Africa without knowing some of these nuances that you ain't gonna necessarily get from a lot of your expat circles, right? You got to go out and you got to talk to people who are actually from there. And one of the things that I pride myself on is that when I do from the US, I make sure to integrate myself into communities that are communities of people who have lived there. And not that I'm going to get all the nuances of their culture, because, last time I was in South Africa, I sure enough got off the plane and I was trying to do some South African dances to the immigration guy, and he was not feeling me. I thought we was having a moment. But alas, he did not. So I got an amazing sister here. I'm going to let her introduce herself again, because I know some of y'all guys going to come for me on the comments. South Africa is a big country and there are a lot of different perspectives here, but we bringing you one of them because I think it's important. So let's do it. Tell them about yourself, girlfriend.
Hey, so my name is Lebo, and I was born and bred in South Africa. So I grew up here most of my life, in Johannesburg and in the Northwest Province. I work as a copywriter. I used to work in TV and film and radio before, and then I sort of pivoted into marketing. What else can I say? Johannesburg is a very interesting place, very cosmopolitan, very colorful, very you'll definitely love it or hate it here, depending on how much of a big city you can handle. An African big city, that is, because big cities
There's a difference. There's definitely a difference.
A huge difference. And that's about it. I'm Tswana speaking. So you're definitely right about the different perspectives, because there's in South Africa there's black people, and in the black people group you have Zulus, you have Tswanas, you have Xhosas. So we have 11 official languages. And with the demographics or the people groups, we have black people, colored people, white people, and Indians. And then still on our forms we still have those categories, and the other one listed other. So that's just a bit weird.
I'm glad you jumped in on that, because I think that right, what you just said right there is already like some glaring differences, particularly from like an African American perspective, right? One, you're talking about a country where you have 11 national languages, 11, right? So already right there, like folks in America, some people don't even speak English, right? And I'm not talking about no pidgin English, like, because that's actually type of English, like they.
English.
Okay, and then I think one of the other interesting things is when you talk about Black versus colored, because like me, when you hear somebody, and I'm just going to use an American reference because most of my audience is American, a slight bit being African. When you see somebody like Trevor Noah and he says he's Black, right? You're like, no motherfucking shit, Trevor. Like, you look Black. But like for him as a South African, that's pretty political for him to say something like, given his complexion. And so I want to talk a little bit about color and what that means from a South African context. Because in the United States, if you got a drop of Black, it don't matter how white you look. Now, Black people may talk about you, but like for the most part, you're gonna be considered like a Black person. And I got friends, I got family members who is the whitest of the white looking, but they Black, and they will tell, look, blackity Black.
All the way through.
So even me, when I go to South Africa and I see somebody, I'm like, you're Black. It's like, I'm not Black, I'm colored.
It is a thing.
And like they get a little offended. It's like, okay. So can you just explain what that means to folks?
Yeah. So when I check to my colored friends, and with the previous company that I used to work at, an interesting thing that colored people would say is that colored is a culture, and colored comes all the way from the apartheid era, where it's even confusing for us, because, well, for me as a Black person, I understand it, that if you're not Xhosa or Tswana or Zulu or any of those traditional indigenous African tribes, then you're not considered as colored, you're considered as Black. But then if you're more of the Khoisan origin and you have a slightly softer hair, like Solange's hair type, and you are slightly lighter in complexion, then but that was the apartheid era. That's how they differentiated between black and colored. So it was
Girl,
just
you're
these
like
weird.
you don't have dark skin. You don't have dark skin.
Exactly. Exactly. So this whole apartheid thing, I think that's what messed us up because we are black people. There's actually not much difference between black people and colored people other than cultural nuances. So other
In the
than
language they
food.
speak, right? They speak
Yeah,
Afrikaans at home.
exactly. They speak Afrikaans. And I've got colored family as well, mostly from my mother's side because my grandmother, she was from the far northwest into the Northern Cape area, and that previously was dominated by the Khoisan and the Tswana tribes. So I think, yeah, definitely apartheid messed it up because there's no real difference between black and colored other than cultural nuances, other than language. But we're all pretty much the same, and colored people contributed immensely to the apartheid struggle. But again, it's not spoken about as much as it should be because there's a lot more focus on the role that black people played.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of focus as well on the role that some white people played, like your Ruth Firsts and Helen Josephs and all of those guys, and even the ones that aren't super famous. So this whole weird thing between black and colored, it really is weird. And a friend of mine posted not so long ago that she finds it quite racist when black people are like to colored people, oh, but you're not black enough, or you can't do this, you can't do that because you're not black. It's, for me, it's the weirdest thing ever, and I'm still learning about colored culture and what colored people feel and think about, South African society and how they fit in. But yeah,
When you grew up, was it, especially because you grew up in Joburg, you grew up in Josie,
yeah.
you grew up in the big city. Were you mainly around black people? Was it black and colored people? Is Joburg still considered relatively segregated? Just give me some history there.
Mm. Yeah, so I grew up in the West Rand, so it was mostly in the township area. That was before 1993.
Okay.
So yeah, so during the apartheid era, you'd only be in a township if you were a black person. So either in an Indian township, a colored township, or a black township. You were never allowed to live in the suburbs, which were considered as white areas.
So
Um,
explain to me the difference between like a suburb and a township because the townships are also outside of the city, correct?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So in Joburg, because Joburg is considered as a city altogether, and in the city there's like pockets of areas that in the apartheid era they were segregated according to race.
Okay.
So the better, more central areas that had better services, that had water, lights, so proper municipality services, those were white areas. So your Parktown, your Hyde Park, your Saxon World, that's where all the big mansions are.
Mhm.
And then townships were created. They pretty much called slum areas.
Mhm.
So the apartheid government was like, okay, all black people, all colored people, move out of our area,
Mhm.
and we'll find land for you, build random houses, make it so enclosed that if we wanted to have a siege, there would be
Mhm.
no way in or no way out. So to a large extent, Soweto is still like that, where there's where there was actually very few escape routes if the government, like in 1976 when the government came down because of the 1976 Soweto uprisings. So yeah, townships were created just as areas to pretty much dump black people in by the apartheid government. And then post 94, because people were already living there, it was just a matter of providing development to the area.
Mhm.
So building proper houses, making sure that people have food, access to work and food and play areas, putting in lights, putting in sewage, proper sewage, putting in services. So I remember a friend of mine who grew up in Soweto. She was telling me that she can see a huge difference between Soweto now and Soweto when it was still under the apartheid,
Mhm.
regime rule. She says that once you pretty much leave SA and maybe leave Johannesburg and come back again, you can see a huge difference in how the government has made an effort to uplift predominantly black areas in that aspect. But there's still issues where services aren't there. There's a lot of protest
Okay.
services, both in townships and in rural areas. Yeah, so we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go.
Now, in Soweto, is it being, cause just because most people will know Soweto from the movie and
Yeah,
the uprising that you mentioned, is
yeah.
Soweto being gentrified? Like, are white people moving in?
Nope, not that I know of.
Really?
Not that I know of, because I think
Really?
not that I would be surprised if I saw a white family living in Soweto. I haven't as yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't as yet, but I could be wrong because I
Okay.
I live I live either in the northern suburbs or in the West Rand. So in West Johannesburg. Yeah, I haven't seen any white families in the townships unless if it's changed, but I would be pleasantly surprised if I
Really?
did.
Oh, that's so interesting because I feel like that
Yeah.
has definitely become the trend in the United States of America of just white people just being just as happy as could be, moving into predominantly inner city communities and
Oh, really?
but then shifting the culture as well, right? Like when white people
Yeah.
started to move into Harlem, like in the park, they had a big drum circle. A lot of some of the newer white residents were like, "Oh, the drumming disturbs us at 8 o'clock in the morning." Well, you moved into our neighborhood, sweetie. Like,
Exactly. So assimilation.
now let's talk a little bit more about Johannesburg because when most people in my audience, even my Nigerian folks who are watching too, when they think about moving to South Africa, there's usually only two places they think about moving to: Josie or Cape Town.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
now I'm not gonna lie. Every time I go to Joburg has all these nicknames, folks. That's why I'm saying all these things. I get a little scared, even though, like I'm a badass when I'm in Lagos, because Johannesburg has a little reputation. And I ain't ready. Like I feel like and these are stereotypes, guys. So again, don't come for me in the comments. I feel like Nigerians are a special type of crazy, and they are, but like South Africans, they like set tires on fire and
Oh
like
boy.
carjackings, like so let's just talk a little bit about one, like safety in Johannesburg, and then two, like neighborhoods and just community and where's the like somebody who's moving to Johannesburg, what should they pay attention? Because every time I go to Johannesburg, every South African friend's like, Jackie, roll up your windows. I'll be riding through Joburg with your window down, like la 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 la, walking down the street with
Yeah.
your phone out. No, I don't walk down the street with my phone out, like just in anywhere in the world because that's just
Mhm.
dumb. But
Yeah.
but just, because like every time I'm in Joburg, I look out and I'm like, it doesn't look dangerous. Like I've been in dangerous places. Like, what are you talking about? Don't walk here at night. Like, there's no one here. It's just a pretty park. So
Yeah, I definitely hear you with that. I think yeah, like any African big city, it's just you need to be cautious when walking around at night. And I'd say one thing is as soon as you land, make sure that you take an Uber and not Bolt, because Bolt has come under fire for safety issues.
mm,
Just this week alone, a tweet went out from one female customer. She was almost kidnapped, and she had scratches and all sorts of things on her body. She showed the pictures and tweeted the driver's stuff. What's it called? A vehicle number and
mm-hmm.
his picture.
Just like,
So Bolt has really had issues with safety. And I mean, this week's tweet is one of dozens from the time they started coming into SA.
okay.
So I'd say one thing: make sure you use Uber and not Bolt or any of the other meter taxis, because Uber has safety features and it's more trustworthy. In terms of areas, it would depend if you're coming in with a family. Still areas like Bryanston. I'd say Bryanston is a good family area. It's a bit pricey. Houses there, the last time I checked, they don't fall between the range of um 1.5 and 1.9 million rand. So that would be,
Dollars.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So a general
Is
an
that
average
like so?
amount.
Do most people rent or do most people own?
So that's the other thing. You can either rent. Renting is if you're moving around a lot and if you don't want transfer costs and mortgage costs and you don't want to commit to a home. And then if you want to commit to a home, if you feel like you can settle down and this is the type of area you enjoy, you know that you're going to be here for a while, then you can buy property. And for a townhouse, so a townhouse is like a smaller version of a house in an enclosed estate.
Okay.
So a lot of Joburgers feel like that's safe because there's a security at the front gate, and
Gated
you know
community.
you're
Yeah, okay.
pretty much a gated community, and your neighbors are close by, and you don't have massive amounts of space, so you don't have to mow the lawn and do the garden every week. It's just like if you do have a garden, most of the downstairs units have gardens, and then first floor, second floor, they have balconies. So it just depends what you prefer. So if you want to buy, the average price in areas like North Riding, yeah, the far north areas, that the average price would be 1.5, 1.9 million rand.
To buy.
Um, yeah, to buy.
Okay. And
And then
what are rents like?
rent also depends on the area that you're renting in. So if you're renting in Randburg is like the most central. Everybody who's anybody, especially young people, they live there.
That's what you want to be. That's what everybody watching want to be.
Exactly. So Randburg is a pretty cool area to rent in because rent there goes for 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 rand. So you can find a pretty cool place for a decent price. And
Now, is
with
it per
some place.
month or like in Lagos? A lot of times it's per year, per 2 year.
Oh yeah, it's per month. So this side you pay rent per month. You don't pay it like per year. And that was one thing that surprised me about Lagos and generally West Africa. They like pay per year. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh, yes, get caught with a
Yeah.
lot of cash, right? Now
A
let's talk
lot of.
because you mentioned like apartments and housing, and you mentioned services. Now, as a Lagosian,
Hmm.
power.
Yeah.
Like all I gotta say, if you're moving to Lagos, you need to make sure that you check that your place has a generator and what the generator fees are, because fuel can cut your apartment might not be expensive, but using fuel because there ain't no power for 8 months, is a
Hmm.
reality. What's the situation going on in Joburg?
Yeah, so in Joburg, we have this thing. Well, our power cuts are called load shedding, and the city of Joburg, they would tweet out the load shedding schedule so you can plan your life around it. So let's say they say we in stage 3 load shedding, then they'll say that power cuts are going to be between 6 a.m. and so it's usually 4 hours, so 6,
Okay.
7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so 6 a.m., between 6 a.m., 10 p.m., and then maybe an afternoon, 4 hours, and maybe an evening, 4 hours. So they'll let you know when the power cuts are going to be so you can either go to a cafe to work or because with working from home, it's gotten a bit complicated. Companies usually have generators. It's just that with us normal citizens, we like I felt the need to get a generator because I'm like, oh, these power cuts are getting annoying, and having to drive out to a cafe and use public Wi-Fi, that's also a bit like not entirely safe. But this side, a generator is a nice to have. So I would say if you get irritated with waiting for 4 hours for power to get on, then do invest in a generator. But it's generally not necessary. But if you know that you just get impatient, yeah, a generator would be good.
If you don't know what it's like to be out without power, then you might want to consider a generator just because, like, I
Yeah.
mean, living in Lagos,
Mm.
it's like, oh, it's week number 3, like still no power. So you definitely get
Ooh.
used to it and you adjust and you learn how to use other things. And you, like you said, you go out, you go to coffee shops, etc. But now
Mm.
during COVID-19, a lot has changed, which is interesting because I believe like the news media was saying that South Africa had implemented some of the strictest COVID-19 regulations, precautions, in particular because they have such a large immunocompromised population, right? And
Mm.
taking people who are immunocompromised and introducing COVID-19 ain't cute. Like,
Yeah, it was hectic.
ain't cute. So can you just talk a little bit about, and I believe South Africa is planning to open back up to the international world in October.
Yes.
Uh, But can you just explain what it, and now I think you've back, because they had different levels. I know you got sued, like Americans. I feel like South Africans love to sue.
Yeah, quite a thing.
So I know at some point there was some sort of lawsuit because people said the
Mhm.
regulations were too strict and they didn't make sense. So just give us a 411 on what it has been
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, so lockdown came on the 26th of March. I remember the week, no, the week before and 2 weeks before, people were already like, "Oh my goodness, Corona is here. We need to like leave our offices and stuff." So, like marketing and advertising agencies that have a little less staff than big corporates, they managed to migrate everyone onto remote desktops and stuff. The corporates, I think they struggled a little bit with working from home because everything is so centered around offices. Um, so when they announced, I think the week before official lockdown, they were like, the president was like, "Hey guys, y'all get ready. It's about to go down." And then the 26th came, the entire country pretty much shut down. So no one could go into offices. Yeah, and I felt a lot for informal traders and people that work with people, like hairdressers, people mostly in the city, because they couldn't work, they couldn't get, the money that they needed to get. So
Was the
a
government
lot of
providing
those.
any sort of stipends or spend ads for the informal?
Yeah. So there was a COVID-19, I forgot the proper name, but it was almost like a bailout plan
Okay.
that the government had to say that, if you're negatively affected by COVID-19, like you lost your job, you lost your income, apply for government funds and, just to keep yourself afloat. And the UIF, which is Unemployment Insurance Fund, it was also there to help companies that were in distress, and also government funds. But there's a lot of issues with that. Like my sister was, and another cousin of mine, they were affected by the retrenchments and scaling downs, and the whole issue of, oh, we're not getting money in. What are we going to do? How are we going to stay afloat? Um, and some of them managed to get some funds, and some companies managed to get some funds. Some companies didn't. So um, a lot of people did lose their jobs. So
Okay.
I just forgot the percentage, but it was a significant number of people that lost their jobs. And thankfully, community groups, they really stepped up to the plate to say, "Hey guys, if you're struggling to put food on the table, let us know. We'll give you food packages to at least assist in that area." So a lot of community groups really stepped up to the plate. And people pretty much found, if you could digitize your business, people started opening online stores. I know a friend of mine uh, opened well started their online clothing company finally, after saying, "Okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this." Finally launched. So businesses that could move online, at least they managed to stay afloat. Some people that could keep their jobs managed to keep their jobs if they were not affected by retrenchments. So it was pretty heavy. I think the heaviest was also a lot of the loss of life, because you'd see on Twitter and in family WhatsApp groups that, oh, so and so passed away, so and so passed away. So I think coupled with that, it was quite hectic. And a friend of mine who's a counselor said that a lot of people called in saying we need marriage counseling, because now there
You're
was nowhere
alone
to
all
run.
the time. Yeah, you're with yourself
Exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And things that you would sweep under the carpet because you have to rush to work and
Yeah.
commute. You have to rush to kids, and then weekends, it's weddings, it's probably funerals, it's partying, it's this and that. So now you are sitting in a confined space, and now you have to confront your issues. And a lot of people were like, "I'm going insane. What do we do?" So that was interesting to know that, what,
Yeah.
people need counseling. And also grief counseling spiked up a lot because of all the losses. Yeah, but I think the economy, hopefully it will recover, because yeah, we did take about, I think now the GDP loss, or there was some loss of 51%. I'm just not wording it correctly, but yeah, a lot of people did lose their jobs. And that's where most of the fights came from, especially from the alcohol and tobacco industries, because they said, because there was no tobacco products or alcohol allowed for sale, because doctors needed to have trauma centers empty. So alcohol was banned in
Wait,
level
alcohol was
5.
banned and people at home with their spouses and
Yeah.
their kids?
So you could only have coffee.
Okay,
Yeah. So
okay.
that
So alcohol.
that was the
Okay.
biggest thing. So no cigarettes.
I bet you home brewing went all the way up. Looks, everybody
It
at
went
home
all the way
making
up.
something, making something.
Yeah, it went all the way up in the backstreet market as well. Because people then started buying alcohol from friends, and when people are like, "Oh, so there's a need. Let me spike the prices up to make a higher profit." And unfortunately, some people still paid for that. But yeah, but doctors actually were quite relieved in April from trauma cases because they were like, our trauma units are empty. So that really just highlighted that, shucks, do South Africans really rely on alcohol to deal with life and to deal with issues? Because,
That's a very interesting like stat right
mm,
there.
yeah.
And one that I wasn't even necessarily aware of. But I know just around the world in general, people
Mm,
over rely on alcohol, right, as a coping mechanism. But wow, I
mm,
just never really necessarily thought of it in
yeah.
those terms.
Yeah.
Kind of a
Yeah. So
sad thing, yeah.
yeah. That was quite an interesting find.
So
Yes.
let's switch to non-COVID-19 times because there's some folks
Mm-hmm.
out there who are like, COVID gonna be over any day now. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Get a vaccination. And then we
Yeah.
have to build up enough people who actually have the vaccination in them to build up herd immunity. But I'm not going to go to my public health bandwagon right now, except to say people stay safe.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Joburg in particular, because I'm going to ask you some questions about Cape Town too.
Yeah.
When there isn't COVID, because one of the things that I love about Joburg, and one of the things that I don't think people realize is that it's a super hype city. Like it's artsy. Like you can have a lot of fun there. Now my fun, I'm not gonna lie, again, my fun's always interrupted because I'm dancing somewhere and I always got some waiter who's like, Auntie, please pick up your wallet. Auntie, please pick up your phone. Auntie, I don't want it to get stolen. And I'm like, I'm good. Like pass it. So I want you to talk about because the street art is amazing. The galleries are amazing.
Yeah.
People need to hear because when people think about visiting South Africa, they think about seeing all the apartheid stuff, which you absolutely should, right? You absolutely should see where Nelson
Mm,
Mandela spent 30 plus years, all that stuff. You should go to Desmond Tutu's house, all those things. But
mhm.
it's a dope city. Like,
It really is. It really is. Because, I mean, just speaking about the Apartheid Museum and all those other things that you could do in Soweto, the biggest kind of social area is Vilakazi Street, where you can, that's the place in Joburg where you can try a lot of traditional African or South African cuisines. And just chill out, have a good time, check out the markets. There's some vendors selling like mugs and t-shirts and a whole lot of stuff that is either Zulu or Xhosa or vendor tradition. You can see a lot of Ndebele art as well on the buildings. Um, so it's a pretty nice place, and then you can go bungee jumping at the Soweto Towers. So that's pretty cool, and then enjoy a braai afterwards at Chafwozi. So yeah, so
yeah,
there's quite a lot to
can we
do.
talk about why you South Africans and you Kenyans love barbecue so much? Like love barb. Like,
It is delicious. And now that it's
Go
summertime.
it's lunchtime. Let's pull out the grill. Why? Like, what are we
Yeah.
celebrating? It's this day, like it's Monday. Let's go.
So it's definitely the go-to social thing. So if you want friends, if you literally want friends to come over and have a good time, just say we're having a barbecue, we're having a braai. You can bring your own drinks. Let's just chill out and have fun. So it's the easiest thing to get people into the vibe. The easiest.
Barbecuing.
It works like a charm every single time. So that's like the
You're
go-to
right.
activity. Yeah, and then another area that I like is Gold Reef City. So there you can go on rides. You can go on a ride called the Anaconda, another one called the Tower of Terror. So that ride is just, for me, it's scary. So if you really want to scare yourself a bit, when Gold Reef City opens, go for the Tower of Terror. It's freaky. And then there's a whole lot of nightclubs. So from Thursday night up until Sunday night, yeah, you can go clubbing. You can.
How late are your nightclubs open?
They usually close. Well, because I usually leave at around 2 a.m. But I suppose they close at around 5, 6 a.m.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause
Yeah,
I know when I'm in Lagos, sometimes especially if I have like a Saturday morning flight,
yeah.
I will be going to the airport about 7 or 8, and the clubs are still 7, 8 a.m. Clubs still
Oh
going
God.
strong.
At some point they kick you out. They're like, no, guys, just go home. We're done.
Like, but you know, she says she usually leaves us at 2. Let me tell y'all where I'm at 2, sleepy.
Yeah. At 2 a.m. I'm just like, oh no, I've danced, I've had a great time. Let's now call it a night. Yeah, so there's
Now,
a lot of
there's
plans.
another thing I just want to highlight because I in every episode where I interview anybody from the African continent, I always have to talk about this. And this is how African women dress.
Mm.
Because I truly think that, and I can say this for the whole continent, at least most of the continent I've been to, and I've been to a lot of places, I don't really think there are women in the world who dress better than African women.
Mm-hmm.
Like and
That is
sorry
true.
bias, but like they bring it, and every time I'm in South Africa too, I'm like, oh my God, these women are
Yeah.
gorgeous. Like they're bringing it, they're fashionable, and like not only are they fashionable in terms of like South African fashion and incorporating traditional fashion into in a modern way, but also just
Mm-hmm.
I mean fashion on the continent just in general. And then you start
Mm-hmm.
bringing European, American, all that influence, and you see it all. Like every time I'm in Johannesburg, I'm like, wow, like
Yep.
wow,
Yep.
like
Yep. So we pretty much wear everything. Yeah, it's just like that. Also, like I've seen women in Lagos, in Nairobi. Everyone is just dressed to the T, and it's a mixture of like African print and
hmm
our own unique way of doing stuff, and also suits and
hmm
heels and hair is
yes.
still a huge thing. Hair is you can weave it up, you can braid it up, you can cut it off, you can relax. But though relaxers are decreasing, I read a stat that in South Africa relaxers have decreased by 30%. So revenue derived
Wow.
from
Okay.
relaxers, and now there's a lot more independent natural hair products available.
The one thing I
Um,
always appreciate about South African women, at least what I've noticed, and again, pushback, is a
yeah.
lot of women will wear short afros, which I think are so beautiful and so
Oof,
gorgeous.
they are stunning. They are
Yeah.
stunning. So we've come a long way in accepting our natural hair and just saying, you know what, all these arguments of don't wear weaves, do this, do that, don't relax, rather keep it
Whatever
natural.
makes you feel comfortable. That's what I say. Like if you want to
Exactly.
weave to your butt, rock a weave to your butt. But don't talk about somebody
Exactly.
else who got a short natural haircut. That's all I say.
Exactly. And that's the sentiment now. Although some women are pushing back saying, oh, but if you wear a weave, it means that you're not confident in your African hair. It's still a debate amongst women, but generally we just like, no, I'm just gonna do whatever I want to do.
Now, how much does it cost? How much does it cost for maintenance? Like, how much does it cost to either get like your hair faded, some braids in? Because in the U.S. that ain't cheap.
It's not cheap. Even weaves this side, they're really not cheap. The last time I checked, because it also depends on inches and all of that.
Mhm.
So I think the average price is about 5,000 rand. And I don't even know the
Wait,
quality of
isn't
it.
an apartment 6,000 rand?
An apartment is 6,000 rand. So a weave is pretty much the same amount as an
Oh, you got to
apartment.
choose your hair or food. I mean, or
Or at least save up for it so you can be chilled in. But braids for me, I prefer braids because they're more affordable, and it's more about affordability,
Mhm,
right? So braids, let's say you want twist braids that just go below your shoulders.
mhm.
That would be around 400, 500 rand.
Oh,
So
that's very affordable.
that's very affordable. Yeah, that's not a bad price at all, because then you can sit for 6 weeks with your braids, 4 to 6 weeks, and you know that you're sorted. A haircut, the last time I went for a haircut, it was about 250 rand, but it depends on the salon that you go to,
Yeah, yeah.
because then
I mean,
they'll treat you.
if you want to be fancy, then I'm sure you can
Yeah.
probably pay American prices, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So it all depends on like the relationship you have with your hairdressers and what you can afford. But I think definitely getting wigs and weaves, that's the more expensive hair maintenance. And like once you have a great weave, or a great set of weaves, you can just cornrow your hair, put it on, and you sort it. But that requires a lot of saving. Whereas with braids and faux locks as well, yeah, you can just put it in and chill for 6 weeks. So it really depends on what you want and what you can afford.
Okay. But see,
Yeah.
like, and now what sort of hair are there South African hair products that women use, or are women more into the international brands? Let's talk a little bit about like or like the shea butter. Like for a
Mm.
while, everybody was talking about like shea butter, cocoa butter, coconut oil. That was just like you had to use that. Now it's rice water. I feel like, I mean, there always goes in these phases in America. Like this is what people in Africa are using, and and sometimes I'm like,
Mm.
who?
Not really, but okay.
What people? Be
Oh
more
God.
specific.
Yeah. Yeah. So this side, there's a lot of independent hair brands, like Zoya Naturals, Native Child, Pearl Tussi's hair brand. I think it's Afro Botanics.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so those after that whole Clicks Pharmacy Tresemme debacle where they called black hair dull, gray, and some other weird word, frizzy, I think. So they put a picture of black hair and they were like dull, frizzy,
In
and
an African country.
in this South Africa that we're speaking about. And then they were like, normal hair is straight, sleek, and they used some other word and they showed blonde hair.
Uh-huh.
And that was last week, yeah, last week or the week before. And of course the whole country we
Of
blew up and
course,
we
of
were like,
course. Uh-huh.
hell no, hell
Uh-huh.
no. In this South Africa in 2020 and you still posting things like that? No. So then a lot of women started Twitter threads saying, okay, these are the hair products that you guys can use for your natural hair. They're preservative free, um, no parabens, no animal testing. So I guess that kind of thrusts all of these products into the spotlight to say, guys, these things are available. Black Jamaican castor oil, conditioners, hair custards, coconut oils if you want to, shea butters if you want to. So I guess that's the good that came out of that. But it's just a pity that we need to wait for a crisis to start supporting black businesses and learning about black products, because then an argument came out that, okay, are there any black owned pharmacies in South Africa? And we really had to dig in deep to find those. But
Yeah.
in terms of hair, yeah, if you have like a curly afro or dreadlocks or yeah, those two natural styles, you won't struggle finding products here, and you can just order them online.
And is
Yeah.
there any pushback in the corporate world with women who wear their hair in natural styles?
Um, Not that I know of, because I haven't experienced pushback with my natural style outside of high school and primary school.
Hmm.
But in the office, because I worked in entertainment, so I started off in a youth radio station and then moved into advertising, and no one really cares about it. It's just us as black people, I feel, because when I had an afro, when did I start having it? In 2012. Like some of my friends and family members will be like, oh girl, you need to like straighten your hair, or you need to blow it out so that it's a cute afro and not a messy afro, because then people won't hire you and people will think you're weird. So Solange's afro was seen as the good afro, and then if you had black hair, 4C hair type, that was seen as the bad afro by mostly the black community. But yeah, I think more your formal career streams like lawyers and accountants, I think they struggled a lot with hair, where it had to be straight and that was good. And if it was an afro, then it had to be a neat afro. So again, the Solange type of afro that's in a neat little bun, like a ballerina.
Yeah.
So hair politics is a thing here. Even one student activist, her name is Zuleika Patel. She was, I think, in the 10th grade at Pretoria Girls. It was a huge story in SA where she protested against
Was it
discriminatory
a
hair
public
policy.
school or a private school?
It's a public school, Pretoria Girls High. Yeah, as far as I know, it's a public school. Yeah, because it's still written in the code of conduct that your hair must be straight or not braided, or so pretty much the rules say your hair should not be black like this. It should be more white oriented. So she like they had a whole protest around that, and I'm pretty sure that the school changed their policies, but It is quite a thing, and it's also industry dependent. So if you in the more creative industries, then people won't really care that much. But if you're in the formal industries, then it becomes a thing where now your hair blocks you from getting opportunities, or from people not focusing on work and rather focusing on microaggressions such as hair. Yeah, it's a
So
pity though.
yeah, I want to talk now. We're going to just transition a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about expats, particularly Black expats in South Africa. And I think we'll narrow it first and just talk about Black Americans who immigrate, because that's what they're doing, to South Africa, and kind of what the perception is of them. And I'll just start from a Nigerian perception, and it can be hit or miss. I've heard my fellow brethren say some of the dumbest shit about Black Americans that I've like, are you white? Like, are you a white person? Like, I've literally been sitting next to a friend, and if he's watching, you know who you are, who said, if I saw a Black man, he's Black Nigerian, walking down the street, I would cross the street too. They're scary. Yeah,
Wow.
and I feel
Oh
like,
no.
and look, and I wanted to say, like, and if you called my number and I picked up, I I think you were scamming me and hang up. So like it goes both ways, buddy. It goes if you go to hella stereotype people, the hella stereotype. That's my rant. Um,
Mm.
and people who've watched my YouTube channel before, y'all know I go off on my Nigerian people a lot, but at the same time, I go off on African Americans a lot, making Africa one homogenous continent, which it is not. So it goes both ways. But I would love to hear just the South African perspective of African Americans, and not necessarily just your perspective, but just kind of what the everyday person thinks of.
Yeah. So there isn't quite a zone in on African Americans. I think
See, y'all
most of
ain't nobody in
the
the world. See, y'all ain't nobody in South Africa thinking about y'all.
and if we do meet an
Like,
African
right? But I
American
kept it for real. She was like, "Ain't nobody. We got bigger problems."
in a nutshell. In a nutshell. And I think it's a cool factor because they're like, oh, you Black Americans. So they almost think like it's a hip hop movie or some, hip hop thing going on. So it's a cool factor. I'll definitely say it's a cool factor to be Black American. Yeah, people think that, oh, Shaq's Black American. I see you guys on TV, you're doing the most. So, so the perception is good. I'd say it is good. It's very stereotyped to thinking that, you're a hip hop video or you just elite and you have so much money and influence. That's generally how people see America. And I guess with Black Americans, yeah, it's still the same thing. It's pretty much still the same thing. Even like with things like Black Lives Matter, people
Yeah.
posted and protested because I mean the themes are pretty much the same. We still struggle with racism in the country.
You
I
show
think
police
the main
brutality
issue
as
is
well, or no?
no, not police. Police this side are pretty much the same as Nigerian police, where you can just bribe your way out.
You go. You give them like 40 rand.
Yeah, it's a pity though, because I mean, it just makes the whole system not work, So, yeah, but you wouldn't really hear, but most men complain of police brutality, saying that, but it's not as brutal as America, where you lose your life.
Okay.
It's just being manhandled and beaten up here and there, but they were probably drunk and talk back to the police something. But as a woman, no, you're just wary because most police officers are male, and we just like, oh, another male.
They're slimy. They're slimy.
Yeah, yeah. But generally, police brutality, like what we see in the US, nah, we don't have it here.
Okay. Oh, that's
We
very
really
interesting.
don't. Yeah, we
Okay,
don't
now
have
let's
it
talk. So let's expand the scope now, because we're talking about Black people. Now let's
here.
go to xenophobia, because
Yeah,
Zimbabweans, my Nigerians, y'all
because
don't.
that's the main problem.
In fact, it's again going back to the airport. So I'm getting off the plane from Lagos, landed in Joburg.
Mm.
6 Nigerians in front of me at immigration, and I'm like, okay, like I'm getting actually nervous because the first three they were sending them right back to Lagos. They're like, nope, you can't come in. One,
Oh
two, three.
wow.
So we get to number 4, and I'm like, oh crap, and they send them in the back room somewhere. And just for you guys who are watching, Nigeria and South Africa just have this funny relationship. Like, I feel like Nigeria will deport 6 South Africans, and then South Africa will deport 10 Nigerians. For what? I don't know. It's just this banter back and forth. And I happened to one day be on a panel with the ambassador from South Africa to Nigeria. Lord have mercy. I thought they
Mm.
would come for me. Those Nigerians ripped that man a new. When
Oh,
I say they let him have it, they let him have it. I was like, oh,
oh boy.
I wouldn't have. I would never actually do a public forum in Nigeria ever, sir. But like again,
Mm.
I'm ranting. This is your opportunity. So I would love to just hear about, because I know it's complicated, right? And I feel
Mm.
like when a lot of people in America think about South Africa, they think the Black people in South Africa overcame apartheid, like they freed themselves, they had these truth tribunals, and like now everything is good and gravy. But the reality is like that's not. There are still a lot of Black South Africans, I'm sure colored South Africans, and maybe I don't know about white people, who are struggling, who are
Mm.
struggling, like who have not been lifted up out of poverty, who are still living
Mm.
in not so great conditions. Correct?
Yeah, correct, correct. I think the biggest issue we have is reconciliation. Because I mean, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I watched it as a child, and I remember just hearing all these gruesome stories of what white police officers did to black people, but I don't remember there ever being a conclusion to the story, a full stop, a somehow a forgiveness thing. So I still feel like this country is really just struggling with reconciliation, and we just don't know how to go about it. So that's why we still have issues like racism. I think to a large extent, that's why we have xenophobia as well, because um, there is a migration issue where people aren't properly documented when they come into the country. And then if you're not documented, you can't get a proper job. And
Okay.
if you can't get a proper job, you can't get a proper house, you can't get food, you can't put your kids through school, and you are almost forced to live in a poor community and make money in a different way, or find illegal
Therefore, you
means to
can.
make money. Yeah, so that does contribute, because people don't leave home for shits and giggles. I can say that, like, because I mean, just look at our neighbors in Zimbabwe. They've been struggling with the economy. They've been struggling with human rights issues for such a long time, and people come here because they need to build a better life for their families, and even find some sort of freedom to be like, okay, I can live, I can, for my mental health as well. So I feel
Most
like
people, if their countries would get their shit together, they would go back home.
they would go back home, because
I
I
can say that
mean,
to a lot of Nigerians in America.
hmm,
Like, if Nigeria would get its shit together and just have somewhat of a
hmm,
functional government, like,
hmm, people would go home in a
I
heartbeat,
go
because
back home.
exactly. So I feel like a lot of South Africans still don't understand that it's only people who have either traveled or gotten some sort of education about Africa and about the continent and about our history and about our people that have actually stood up and said, no, we're not going to be xenophobic.
Mhm.
We are going to, call the government out for not taking migration seriously, or picking and choosing who they might give, permits to, and permanent residencies, and visas, and all sorts of other things, because there's still a bigger respect for European tourists and expats than there is for black expats. That I can say for sure, because I've seen
Like
how.
that's all
Um,
over the continent, though. I mean, it's so much
hmm,
easier to leave the continent of Africa when you're on the continent than it is to travel within the continent.
exactly, exactly. And that irritates me a lot. And Shoma Josie, one of the musicians, she said this pretty well. So in a nutshell, she said that people don't leave home for fun. They really do leave home because they need to build a life for themselves. And nobody wants to be in an unsafe neighborhood with crime spiking up. But we also need to realize that there are criminals, like in every society, and they will take advantage of the situation. They will try to put fuel in it to sort of hide the activities. And that's what we're seeing now with people hijacking buildings. And it's not only expats or people migrating into the country. I hate the word foreign and foreigner. It's become such a dirty word. So I try to avoid it, because they've used it as a dirty word to say, you foreigner. No, 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 no. Yeah, so criminal elements have obviously popped up, and it's everyone. It's not just one single person. And I mean, the more people complain to the government and nothing or very little gets done, then people do get angry to say, okay, we're going to take matters into our own hands. And that unfortunately then becomes xenophobic, where you stereotype people and then you
This
say,
is
right,
yeah, and don't
yeah,
allow it. Yeah.
this is it. But in Johannesburg, there are areas that I'd say in the suburban areas, like your Randburgs and Santons and Rosebanks. Those are more open-minded and cosmopolitan. I find that more open-minded. And in university, well, the university that I went to as well was pretty much open-minded. And we had expats from across the continent and international. And that's actually where I got to learn about a lot of African culture, because believe it or not, in schools we are not taught African history. We just taught about World War II, um, the Anglo-Boer War, apartheid, and a little, like a tiny little bit of Khoisan culture. Till to this day, like my cousins, when I was my baby cousins, when I was asking them, so do you guys know of Queen Aminata? Do you guys know of the Kingdom of Kush? And they were like, what? You're crazy. Those things don't exist.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, it is, and that was last year. I was like, it's 2019, and still the curriculum, history has not changed where you add in African history. We really at such a bad place. And things like even our own languages, I still struggle with reading and writing Tswana because we had to learn
You didn't
English
learn
in
it in
order.
school? Like you didn't have
Nope.
classes in it? Oh, that's
Nope. If you grew up in Johannesburg, and I guess the two other main cities, Durban and, well, Cape Town maybe to an extent, but I know Johannesburg, we only did English and Afrikaans. And then if you were in
so
a
interesting.
tradition,
Okay.
yeah, and if you were in a traditional a previous considered black schools, then maybe you could choose between Zulu and Tswana. And then, but if you were in other provinces, so if you were in the Northwest province, which is predominantly Tswana,
Hmm.
you would do Tswana. And then if you were in KwaZulu Natal, which is predominantly Zulu, you would do Zulu. And then if you in the Limpopo province, you would choose between Chivenda, Tonga, and Sepedi.
Now, are
But
these languages similar at all?
well, it is bulked into the Nguni languages, which is Xhosa, Zulu, Swati, Ndebele. So those are very similar. And
Okay.
then the Sotho languages, which is Pedi, Tswana, and Sesotho, those are very similar.
Okay.
But living in Johannesburg, you learn to hear all the languages, even if you can't speak it, because it's so mixed here.
So
So that's the other great thing
what
about it.
is office protocol? Because you have 11 languages in the A
Mm,
office, not everybody's working from home now, but is it
yeah.
acceptable to speak a language other than English or Afrikaans in Joburg?
It is acceptable, because if you're just socializing with your colleagues, then you can switch to Tswana, you can switch to Zulu, whatever you feel comfortable in. But reading and writing and all sorts of work-related documents and stuff, those are in English.
Ah, so you
Before,
wouldn't send an email. You wouldn't send an email in Zulu or something else.
no, you wouldn't, unless if you're sending an email to a Zulu person.
Okay.
But generally, it doesn't even cross your mind to do that. That's so weird.
Really? That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't even cross your mind to do that, but because you would speak to your colleague in Zulu or Tswana, but you wouldn't send them an email in Zulu or Tswana. I've never thought of that actually. That's so interesting.
No, that's really
Maybe
interesting.
I should try it one day.
Just do it, like, just to see what they would say.
Hmm.
Because I think that's interesting because even in South Africa, I guess 2020, there's no push to really protect what I would consider like indigenous languages, right? Like
Mm.
really like protect them, make sure young kids not only speak them but write them.
And a lot of the Khoisan languages have gone extinct. The few that are left are going extinct because no one is doing anything to preserve them. And I know with a language spelled exclamation mark NLUU, it's a Khoisan dialect.
Hmm.
The only people that know it are these three elderly ladies, I think, living in the Northern Cape. And once they pass on, the language is done, as far as I know, unless if their grandkids and any of the community members have made a conscious decision to pick up the language. If they all pass away, then the language is done. So it's quite frustrating, um, where you see those apartheid legacies, and
Hmm.
it's almost like, but what are we doing now in 2020 to preserve our languages? Because the government could put in to say, hey guys, there are 12 official languages. If you want to learn, you need to pick one in order to
Yeah.
to to pass your high school year.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
Or
most
pick
countries,
two.
Guatemala, it's like that. What you have to know in
Hmm,
language. Nigeria, same thing. Like you.
exactly. And I don't know if, because the excuse that I keep hearing in like the news and stuff is that there's not enough teachers that teach Tswana, Zulu, Chivenda. But I'm like, how true is that?
Yeah,
You know, like how true is that?
I
Because
mean,
you can't say
think
they're
that's
not
like
enough.
if the government paid people enough to teach,
Exactly.
there'd be
Exactly.
so I think that's a
Yeah.
big cop out right there. Just is how important our language is to you. So that's
Exactly.
yeah, that's really interesting. It's
Yeah.
also it makes me a little sad just because there you
Hmm.
already know that there are languages who are definitely going to die. And in language,
Ah,
so much culture, like there, and that's
it's
why I
so
always
nice.
encourage people when you go to a country, even if it does speak, English is one of the languages. Like if you can't say a couple things in like different languages, I mean, you got
Mhm.
11 to choose from. If you decide to move to South Africa, it gets you far. Like I always say, the thing that
Exactly.
saves me, and my Yoruba is not that great, but the thing that
Mm.
saves me when I'm in the market and they hear my little accent is that I know
Mhm.
the numbers in Yoruba. Look,
Mhm.
look,
Mhm.
market lady, you want to go, auntie, you want to go back and forth? I
You
know
want to
what price I'm gonna get.
negotiate?
Yeah. I know what price I'm gonna get now. Look.
Exactly. Exactly. And it just helps you like I don't know, it just feels more comfortable if you can speak the language. So even when I visited Kenya, um the first thing that I wanted to do was learn a little bit of Swahili because I just wanted to mesh into the community, you know. So I'd say if you're moving to Joburg, if you predominantly know Zulu
Mm,
and Tswana, you should be good,
okay.
you know, because it's mostly in most townships and in most suburban areas, it's Zulu and Tswana, or Zulu and Sotho. Yeah, Tswana and Sotho are pretty similar. So if you know those two languages plus English, it's a standard. Then you'll be able to like chat in markets, or if you use public transport, like a lot of taxis and buses, then you know it helps just to know that those two languages.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
that gives, I'm going to ask you three more questions and then we got to wrap it up. So the first question is
Cool.
about public transit and how is the
Mm.
best way, if you're going to live like a native, what is the best and the safest way to get around?
I'd say having your own car,
Okay.
but traffic is a nightmare. So pre-COVID, you need to leave home at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. to get to the office by 8:30. Or you can use the train, but it depends. If you're traveling from Joburg to Pretoria or Pretoria to Joburg, then the train is wonderful to use, because you don't want to be stuck in that highway traffic. Already it takes 45 minutes to get to Pretoria, so double that up with nightmarish traffic. It's And peak hour traffic is between 6 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. And then again, from 4:30 until 7:30 or 7 p.m. So yeah, it's not Lagos traffic,
No,
not
no.
at all.
It's like Lagos traffic, like
uh,
so free the next
yeah,
day, like never ends. Like you can't
yeah,
ever predict Lagos traffic. So my
yeah,
next question for you, because I know there's gonna be somebody who DMs me and is like, she didn't get to Cape Town. Yes, I ran out of time. I can bring her back if you guys want.
yeah.
But thoughts on Cape Town versus Joburg in terms of relocation for an expat, particularly a Black expat.
Yeah. So I would definitely say Joburg, because Cape Town salaries are weird. If you're a copywriter, let's say a copywriter with 5 years worth of experience, in Cape Town they'll pay you between 20 and 25,000 rand. In Joburg they'll pay you between 25,000 rand and 30,000 rand per month. So those salary differences, I don't get them. I don't understand why there's a salary
Because Cape
difference,
Town's
but
not cheap. It's not a cheap place to live.
Cape Town is not cheap. It is not cheap because the bulk of the richest suburbs are in Cape Town,
Hmm.
and and also like townships, they've been they don't really take care of black townships and colored townships in Cape Town. So I don't understand why it's so high to live there, but you earn a lower salary. It boggles my mind. I don't understand why. And then Cape Town is a lot slower. So if you really want a slow, chilled pace, then live in Cape Town. But it's not as cosmopolitan as Joburg. Joburg is very loud. It's very like, hey, there's stuff to do and
Okay.
tons of people to meet. So it really is a global, well, a pan-African space, global to an extent as well. Um, Cape Town is lovely for visiting and a quick getaway from the Joburg hustle. So it's got a lot of lovely restaurants, the Kirsten Bosch Gardens, the beach. Obviously, there's no beach nowhere in Joburg. It's just mountain dumps. So it's lovely for tourism and Robben Island Museum where Mandela was kept. But if you want to work and make money, I would recommend Joburg any day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, what is one thing that everybody has to eat, to taste when they come to South Africa?
I would definitely say a South African braai. So pap, chakalaka, dried meat, um, and you can even throw in a beer if you like beer. With beverages, because I prefer coffee over alcohol. I'm just biased like that. But yeah, most people have a braai with beer. Yeah, so I'll definitely say a braai. Definitely a braai.
Did I say that's always like the South Africans go to? Like, let's look.
Yeah, but funny enough, a lot of restaurants with African cuisine are popping up, so you can still experience some jollof, some pilau from Nairobi with the smaller independent restaurants. So if you're feeling adventurous, yeah, definitely go for that.
Well, I know there are lots of people here who are watching this, and their only idea of South African cuisine is not Nando's, because that's in the U.S. now. So, like, is that what we're gonna eat every day in South Africa, Jackie? No, no. The answer to that question is no.
Yeah, if you want to, then your love for Nando's will decline because it gets a bit much to have it every single day.
And my final question to you is, what is a place in South Africa that most tourists, most expats don't go to that they should?
That they should. I think the less popular touristy places. So in Durban, it would be the Durban, not Durban, the KwaZulu Natal, the greater KwaZulu Natal area. So the Smangalizo Wetlands Park. That's a great park to go to see the different types of fish and aquatic
Oh,
life.
wow. Okay, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's lovely. Kruger National Park, I think it's a popular one,
Right.
but yeah, it's quite chill to go to the Kruger. The Garden Route,
Mhm.
in the Western Cape, that's always a beautiful experience. And George is a small town in either the Western Cape or the far Eastern Cape. So that's where you can experience some Khoisan culture, some culture, dances, language. It's in the George area in the Northern Cape as well.
Okay, so
Um,
I'm going to interject you for 1 second because somebody's going to
yeah.
ask me, when you say cape, what do you mean by cape? Because like some people are like, a cape like a superhero? Is she talking about Superman?
So it's the province's name. So there's the Western Cape, there's the Eastern Cape, and then there's the Northern Cape. So I guess Cape was just the popular word, and they just decided to add in North, South, East. Yeah.
There's somebody who's going to write that on my on my
Yeah.
page. A cape. What does she mean by cape?
Yeah, so and also I'd say going to the Drakensberg, that's quite peaceful to see because it's far away from the city. It's green, and if you have sinus issues, your sinuses will love you forever. Yeah, so definitely the Drakensberg if you want something chilled. And in Lesotho, you can hop over to Lesotho in winter because it snows there, so you can enjoy some
I
snow.
didn't even. It snows there. I knew
Mm,
you guys get cold. Like how because
yeah,
Vegas doesn't get cold. Like
yeah,
Vegas, the turtlenext one is 92 degrees Fahrenheit.
yeah.
Like what? That's like 30 degrees. I don't know, 24 degrees Celsius. I mean Celsius. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, in the Maluti Mountains in Lesotho, it snows there. So that's where most South Africans flock to because in Joburg it doesn't really snow. It's just freezing cold. So if you want some African snow, just head off to Lesotho in winter. And the beaches are really great. I enjoy beach holidays because obviously being cooped up in Joburg, there's no beach anyway. Not even like a slight little, you know, showing off some water.
Yeah.
So definitely the beaches. Yeah, we've got some really, really nice beaches. The Atlantic is freezing cold, so if you want to turn blue a bit, you definitely give the Atlantic a bash. But the Indian Ocean, which is the Durban side, that's really warm, so that's lovely. Yeah.
All right, no, this has been amazing. I know that you have provided my audience with things that they definitely didn't know because I know
Yeah.
go to every interview with an open mind, and you definitely have schooled me. So I am very appreciative of your time. I am so thankful. I can't wait. I'm gonna have to bring you back again because
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna get some messages. People always direct message me for some reason. Why don't you ask this? Why don't you ask that? Why don't you ask that? Well, that's just a whole another, like, we're gonna have to do a 3-part series then. So yeah, if you have more questions about South Africa, if you want to go more in detail on Cape Town, Joburg, even like the different capes, we can do a whole geography lesson of South Africa, because I know that there are lots of people who this is where they consider the place that they want to go for a year, 2 years, the rest of their life. And if you are, again, I always say anything's possible, but just make sure you educate yourself, and you respect the people and the culture that you're going into. You got any final thoughts before I say deuces out of here?
Final thoughts. Joburg is really a great place. It's a mad African city, but I think for the most part you'll love it. And I mean, things are not perfect yet, but for the most part you'll love it. And there are areas that you can go to just to have some peace of mind, a little bit of safety. But yeah, come through if you want to come through. We welcome you with both arms.
And that's it for me, guys. Everybody be blessed, be safe, shelter in place, and do what you do. Do your research. If you want to move abroad, it's definitely possible for each and every one of you guys. Again, it's all about changing your mindset. And instead of thinking I can't do this, think I can, and then just forge ahead and you figure out. It may not be the path you thought it was going to be, but you can get there.
Hey, black girl, hey, you good? Because I'm fabulous. I'm a digital nomad, and my lifestyle allows my daughter and I to experience new places, culture, foods, and people. Living abroad and or traveling full-time is amazing. It is freedom. I can work from anywhere. I want more black women to experience the same sort of freedom. I help black women manifest their dreams of a life abroad or a full-time travel. Are you ready for a life beyond your wildest dreams?